Hello and welcome to Conspiracy Games and Counter Games, Season 2 of The Order of Unmanageable Risks, a podcast about capitalism and its anxieties. My name is Aris Komporozos-Athanasiou, and I'm Associate Professor of Sociology at University College London.
And I'm A.T. Kingsmith. I'm a PhD candidate at York University. This season, our podcast is dedicated to going beyond the headlines and the easy answers and exploring the rise of conspiracies, conspiracy theories, and conspiratorial thinking in a gamified capitalist world.
And I'm Max Haiver. I'm Canada Research Chair in the Radical Imagination at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, Canada. And we're very pleased today to be joined by a special guest after a little bit of a break on our podcast, Brent Lee, who has been involved in the conspiracy world from 2003 to 2018. And as he'll explain to us, involved in a number of things that you might have heard about that occurred within those years. However, now Brent runs a very important YouTube channel and blog, which you can find at Brent Lee TV. That's BRENTLEE TV. And you can also reach out to him on Twitter, where he will respond to you and speak to you about his time in those conspiracy worlds. Brent, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Brent, we were just talking before the interview began that today is the notorious 7/7, the 7th of July, which was a date of a very infamous set of terrorist attacks in London, which killed dozens of people. And you were relating to us just before the interview began that this was a very important date for you in your trip down the proverbial rabbit hole as someone who was, as you say, like a conspiracist, not just someone who believed in conspiracy theory, but someone who was generating conspiracy theories with others and really involved in that world of what you called the grand conspiracy. And that since you've begun you've broken out of that world and are helping others, your YouTube channel and your blog and your presence on Twitter has been really influential for many people. And today you posted something about your experience on the original 7/7 and got some feedback. Can you just walk us through that?
Yeah. Today is obviously 7/7, where 52 people were killed by 4 terrorists in 2005. In this road to reconciliation and recovery, I felt today was a necessary time to say I'm sorry to the victims, to the families, to the friends, to every single person that's been affected by these conspiracy theories. And I made a little post today about it to say, I'm sorry. And a survivor actually reached out to me today to tell me that he forgived me and that he was proud of what I'm doing today. And it was such a surreal, emotional moment having that really hit home. It's not just something that I was playing about with on the internet. This was a real person. It was very, very, very important. I think having that today is, quite emotional. On 7/7 itself, 7th of July 2005, I was in the David Icke Forum in the morning. The minute we heard something on the news that said that there was an electrical surge or a power surge, we started jumping, thinking there's something happened. It's a terrorist attack or something. It's got to be a false flag. So we started scouring the news, all the 24-hour news stations. We were looking at all of them. It was a group of us, and basically we were gathering every bit of information that was coming in, every inconsistency, and basically forming the conspiracy of 7/7 over the next few weeks, all the way up to past the failed attack on the 21st of July. We were analyzing everything that was coming out through then. So as usual, most conspiracies seem to be based on inconsistencies within reporting from the press. And that's where the questions come in. I was a part of that conspiracy making day, and for the next 13 years, I pushed this conspiracy theory. I made songs about it. I had a website about it. It was one of my main conspiracies that I pushed because I was so invested in it.
Wow. I mean, that is an incredible story. And thank you for sharing it. And I think, as we were saying too before, thank you for also making it your role to alert people to how this is what happens and how this is done, and tell the story from inside. We're going to go back and maybe ask you about how you got into these worlds and that sort of thing. But maybe a follow-up that's just so close to what we're interested in. I was so fascinated by when you were relating to us, like how you all were on the same forums and doing this kind of it was a kind of creative act together, like actually analyzing the news and then making sort of conjectures. What sorts of people would have been in those kind of forums, and what was it like to be in that community?
That day was very exhilarating because we thought we were catching the government in a criminal act. That's what we were doing. Like back in the early 2000s, there wasn't very much. Conspiracies weren't based on hoaxes back then. They were based on false flags. So if a terrorist attack happened, what we were saying is that it wasn't the terrorists, it was the government or the Illuminati or the New World Order, whatever baddie you want to think it is. So we felt like we were getting justice for the victims by actually finding who the culprit was. So it was very exhilarating. We were like tinfoil sleuths is what I said today. That's how we felt like actual like participating in an investigation or something. People today could probably relate to it with the disappearance and murder of Gabby Petito, when there was a lot of people like doing this internet detective work, trying to find where this woman had gone missing. It's very similar to that.
Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about what you mean by being a conspiracist. So especially if we contrast the term with conspiracy theorist. If you could tell us a little bit about what initially led you down that path.
There's a distinction to be made between a conspiracy theorist and a conspiracist. Now, a conspiracy theorist could be just someone who believes in a few conspiracy theories, mainstream ones, JFK, 9/11 was an inside job, something similar to that. And I don't feel like the conspiracy theorist term will help in any way, because conspiracists tend to act like if you call them a conspiracy theorist, you're insulting them. But conspiracist is someone whose worldview is based on all conspiracies. So I believed that the whole world was being run by an elite cabal. Everything that was happening was part of the conspiracy. So the difference between a conspiracy theorist and a conspiracist is an ideology. If you just play around with conspiracies here and there, well, we didn't land on the moon, then you're just a conspiracy theorist. It's just, As to how I got introduced to this world, it was 2003, and I was just messing around on the computer, to be honest. I've always been interested in documentaries and learning and a couple of conspiracy things, like I said, JFK, Roswell, or stuff like that. I was always very interested in geopolitics, so I liked to learn about terrorism, extremism, etc., things like that. Anyway, I was on the internet, and I used to use a program called DC++. It's a peer-to-peer file sharing piece of software. And basically you install on your computer, you make a little folder, you put all your stuff that you would like to share in this folder, and that gets uploaded through this program. On that program, there was a hub called Documentaries and Lectures. I thought that's great. That's exactly where I want to go. So I went in there and I found a folder, just a random folder. It said The Truth. So I downloaded that. I looked in it and I noticed there was a lot of like JFK or what really happened on 9/11 and stuff like this. And I was like, okay, well, let's download it and let's have a look. So I downloaded it, and there was a series of videos that I watched first. It was Millennium 2000 and Lucifer 2000. These videos were produced by two conspiracists, one called Anthony J. Hilder and the other called Jordan Maxwell. Jordan Maxwell became like a very, very big figure in the conspiracy world. He actually introduced David Icke to the Americas. He brought him over and set him up with a whole series of lectures and got his books published in America. These videos were showing the New World Order conspiracy theory. It was focused on showing like Freemasons and the Illuminati being behind the scenes. And I thought that was interesting, I guess. But it wasn't until I watched one of the 9/11 videos that I really thought, actually, this stuff might be real, because the evidence, in air quotes, was right in front of me. It was right there in plain sight. The videos were showing controlled demolition, and I bought it that day. When I started watching the 9/11 stuff, I completely bought it. And then I had to go back and start watching all the other things to kind of try and figure out what actually has happened here. And the rest is history, really.
I'm curious, like, who you were at that time, because you're like clearly a very smart, very sensitive person. I imagine you were at that time as well. And I think the stereotype of people who become conspiracists is that they're kind of like gnarly trolls who fall for like dumb myths. And that's clearly not the case. So I wonder if you would tell us a little bit about like who you were, all those years ago, and what do you think it might have been in your life that made it so attractive to do that kind of research and fall into those worlds?
I was a singer in a band. I was part of a large social group. All of the bands in the city, we all like hung out together. But I had a slight political leaning when it came to like my music, because my stepdad was in the military. And ever since the first Gulf War broke out, I started paying attention to geopolitics because I cared and I didn't want my dad to go to war. That was essentially something fundamental to me, very anti-war. So I was very aware of geopolitics, Bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, all of that type of stuff. But 2003 comes around, and this is where I was at that moment. We were teetering on war with Iraq, and there was no need to me to go to war in Iraq. The problem was it was in Afghanistan. The problem was Bin Laden. So I had some suspicions. And I think my anti-war sentiment and my suspicion fed into like having this pretext for war. I think that's where I was at the time. And that's why so many of us actually kind of fell for this 9/11 conspiracy myth, because we were anti-war. We didn't want that to happen.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on, you say so many of us. And so I'd love to talk a bit more about maybe the community of conspiracists that you were a part of for this 15 years. Was it exclusively online, and was it in person, and maybe even more centrally, like, what did it feel like? What kind of, just in a general sense, what kind of people were you kind of exploring? If you could just unpack this us a bit.
I thought it was people like me, but obviously the more you speak to people, like, you start to figure out that there's differences between each other. The we I think I'm talking about a lot of the times is the first kind of community I was a part of, and that was in the David Icke Forum. That was a mixed bag of people, obviously. But I think we all have one thing in common, and that's trying to be truth seekers, or trying to expose the powers that be, expose what actually the truth is. I think that's the thing that unites us, and it didn't really matter about some of the other things that we didn't agree with, with each other, shall I say. A lot of the communities were online, but it did spill over into my real life. I was, like I said, I was a musician. So I was asked to go to gigs and go to some like conspiracy lectures, perform there, so I was part of like an outside community as well. Me and my partner were both conspiracy theorists or conspiracists. We met in 2010, and I had like a group of real life friends here in Bristol where we would meet up at once a month to go for dinner. And we like joked like we were the round table, we're the only people in this restaurant that know what's really going on, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and because it was a long time that you spent in that community that you're describing, and could you tell us maybe a bit about what it was that kept you going? Like, what kind of aspects of that community life and the groups and the everyday interactions? I mean, in your own experience, like, what was it that kept you a part of it?
I would say just trying to expose the truth. I think there's a massive difference between the conspiracy theorists of today and the conspiracists of yesterday. It seems like they're a lot less empathetic and caring today. I don't know if this is just my bias or it's because it's just how I felt, but I feel like we were doing it for a better reason back then. We were hopeful. We wanted to change the world. We wanted to bring these people down. And that's the thing that kept me going every day. Need to expose this. I need to expose this. And after time, you feel like you can't speak to people. They don't want to listen or anything. So what I ended up doing was try to be part of the welcoming party. So when people would come into the conspiracy world, I would try and be one of those people that greets them into it. Someone like David Icke or Alex Jones would wake them up and introduce them to this world. And then I would try and be like a bit more like of a welcoming party rather than out there trying to convert or radicalize anyone else.
I think there's a strong trend among academics who study conspiracism, conspiracy theories, conspiracy fantasies, whatever you want to call them. That's the idea that in some way, it's what the people in literature might call like a compensatory fantasy. So we all feel helpless in a world of injustice. And so you gravitate towards the conspiracy theory because you're like, it gives you a sense of having power, if it's only just the power of knowing what's actually going on. But then the kind of critique there is also that like, well, there's what's supposed to happen? Like when you were in those worlds, what was your kind of narrative of what would happen if enough people believed, if enough people knew the truth? Would there be some sort of democratic uprising? Was the idea that things would get worse and then the government would be more repressive and it would show its true colors and then there'd be some sort of revolution? Like, I'm curious what you think of that kind of analysis of, conspiracism emerging from a sense of powerlessness. And also then what were the kind of discussions and debates about what would happen after you guys were successful in sharing the truth?
You're right in there. It does come from a lack of power, lack of feeling of power, but is also brought about by the world being so corrupt. The world is corrupt. Media does lie to you. Politicians do lie to you. Corporations and big banks and business people are fleecing us. Like, that is why we're rebelling against it. It's like the world is corrupt. So we're trying to find an answer for that, basically. And these conspiracies gave me an answer. It gave me okay, that's who's doing it. And we've got a bunch of people to actually point the finger at. It's not just this randomness. We all want to have peace. We all want to feel powerful, like you said, of just knowing what's going on. As to what would happen if we did wake everyone up, we kind of prepared for, I don't want to say prepared. We prepared our minds, I guess, for a chaotic time. But essentially what we used to always say is like, we'll turn the light on and the cockroaches will scatter. And I don't think we planned anything further than that. I didn't plan anything further than that, other than like, well, we'll just have to be here for when everyone wakes up. We'll just have to be here to clean the mess up. But didn't really have any solutions. I think that's something that really kind of pulled me away from a lot of conspiracies back, like when I started coming away from it. Is like, why is everyone so focused on the problem and then reacting to the problem? Where's the solutions? What are we going to do about it?
We'd be curious to hear, what are your thoughts on maybe the role of masculinity in the kind of truth-seeking movement and seeking out these answers, but then also just the role of technology in making it easier to facilitate the formation of these processes?
The masculinity part is something that's like a lot more prominent now. Like I was kind of saying, it feels like there's less compassion today among conspiracists. Whereas when I started kind of getting into it, the moderators of David Icke Forum, I think 3 out of 4 of them were women. So there wasn't any toxic masculinity that is involved in it today. It even wasn't very political. Like there wasn't much of a political leaning to it in the early 2000s. It's only recently, since 2012 to 15 or something, it started becoming this toxic right-wing version. You started getting the incels involved. You start getting the MAGA people involved. It's just this whole, the Gamergate stuff, they started jumping on the conspiracies. I think that's a new manifestation of it. Yeah, and obviously the technology was just the means to spread it and the means to get access to it. Like I said, like me in 2003, I was using dial-up, I think, and it took me 3 or 4 days to download one video, but I kept it on all night downloading that stuff. Like, whereas today it is instant, boom, you got it on your phone, you got it on your tablet, and there's just so much of it. And I've seen that growth. I saw the birth of these social media platforms. I saw how they started to spread, how the communities moved from one thing to the next. Back in the day, it was like David Icke Forum, Prison Planet Forum, just random forums. And then MySpace came around and we all started gravitating towards MySpace. And there was so many like conspiracists on MySpace. It was insane, really. And then obviously we moved on to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Facebook obviously became completely saturated with it, but it took a while. It's just become much more accessible. The more that we have the internet, the more that we have these platforms in our pockets.
So I wanted to go back to something that you just mentioned a moment ago about the political affiliations of the community, the conspiracy community, as you understood them, especially in the first years. And I was struck by what you said, that it's not what it looks like today. So the connection with the far right and with the Trump folks wasn't as clear, or it wasn't there in the way we understand it today. And I was also thinking that, your own analysis, the way you described it on what brought you to that world, was in many ways has a lot to share with, a left-wing kind of progressive analysis of how fucked up the system is and, the injustices of it. So I'm just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how you understood the politics of that community, and what's your inkling, what are your thoughts about what might have shifted at some point there politically?
Yeah, the message of the conspiracy influencers back in those days and the people that followed it was that the left and the right was the same. Iraq war, we had Bush in America and we had Blair in England. So left and right working together to create destruction or whatever. And it was always billed as that. Like these left and this right, it doesn't matter. It's the same. It's two wings of the same bird. That's how most of us got to it. From my research now, oh God, I hate using the word research, but from my looking into it now, Steve Bannon is one of those guys that weaponized and politicized conspiracy world and brought it into the fold. When he said about like radicalizing the gamers and bringing them into it, like it's people like that started to really politicize this. And then you had you had Trump turned up on InfoWars. When I saw that, I was still a conspiracist at that time, wasn't really a fan of Alex Jones at that time. I was at the beginning, but maybe a different story later. I did end up thinking that he was possessed by demons, so I stopped listening to him. But anyway, that's a different part of the story. When Trump turned up on there, I was just like, this is ridiculous. Why is anyone supporting this guy? And obviously Pizzagate comes out and QAnon and all of that sorts of stuff. That's just how it was. We were anti-war. We all were kind of progressive in a way, all the way up to Occupy Wall Street.
Before we go into how you began to exit the community and those perspectives, I wanted to ask you about when you were in those communities, what was it like when experts, academics, journalists, educators wanted to come and debunk the conspiracy theories? We have so many listeners, and so much of what we do in our podcast is try and problematize the way that people think it should be so easy to just go out with the right information and be like, oh, conspiracists, you're a bunch of dupes. Here's the real information. Voila, presto, everyone stops believing in it. And I'm wondering if you can cast your mind back to being in those moments when you would sort of hear those arguments or see those pundits on television. you'd be the target of those strategies of debunking conspiracy theories. I mean, what did you think? How did you and others in the community kind of insulate yourself from them? And then we'll maybe come to what actually does work in a minute.
The first thought would always be, of course, that's what you would say. Of course, that's what you say. You haven't done the research I've been doing. You didn't notice all the numbers that I noticed. You didn't notice all these, completely ridiculous things. But it's hard to change the mind of someone who has come to an idea. Realizing that this was an ideology is very, very important here. It's not an opinion. And to change someone's ideology is really, really tough. The things I would notice, though, was like Michael Shermer, people like that. And they'd come in and act like you're stupid for believing what you believe, that you've got no right to believe what you're believing. And like I said earlier, no, the world is effed up, and that's why we believe these things. We're just trying to find answers. And you, Mr. Shill Michael Shermer, getting probably paid by the CIA or something. Not really, but that's what we thought. This is exactly what I thought. I've been speaking to some BBC journalists, or I spoke to an immunologist recently. And I was like, I would have said, you were a shill. You were not real. I don't see you at work. I don't see you in a lab coat. How do I know? You're just a person on Twitter making up these things. And that is what we thought, though. We did think like there was agents out there trying to make us look bad.
What was the first inkling that led you to maybe want to leave? The first kind of cracks that perhaps like appear in the veneer of some of these things that you believe in the community?
It didn't want to make me leave, but it made me question the community. And that was Sandy Hook. There was a bunch of occurrences around that time. Sandy Hook shooting, the Aurora cinema shooting, the Pulse nightclub shooting, and the Boston Marathon bombing. And I started to notice a new narrative being spun. And that's what a lot of people are very familiar with today. And that's this concept of it being a hoax. We used to believe in false flags. False flags were a real occurrence, but we blamed someone else for it. Real people died. Around Sandy Hook and these other events, the narrative was that nobody died. The narrative that was that these were crisis actors. And I remember me and my partner both from the get-go were just like looking at these crisis actor memes and pictures and stuff and just thinking, what is wrong with these people? Did people look similar? What it's not, these deaths require, these are supposed to be rituals and sacrifices. People have to die in these events for the sacrifice to actually matter. Why would they use fake people like this? This is ridiculous. Because this is part of the thing that I believed. 7/7, 9/11, all these major terrorist events or mass shooting events, even back to Columbine, were ritual sacrifices. That was like my belief. So seeing the whole movement kind of move to this, it's a hoax, they're crisis actors, no one died, made me question the integrity of the truth movement, because I was like, well, I know this is right. I know these people are dead because it serves the ritual. How else? Why else would they do it? It doesn't make sense.
When in your mindset at that time, how were those mass murders ritualistic, like a ritual by whom? And then another quick question following up from what you said, like, why do you think that these other conspiracists had this alternate narrative that it was totally fake?
I was introduced to the idea of events being a ritual by David Icke, by his work. The best example of this is, because this is part of the thing that hooked me, is the death of Princess Diana. Okay, now this is going to sound silly to people. I get it, I understand. But these are the reasons why we believe these things. Princess Diana. All right. Diana, moon goddess. Princess Diana died in the Pont de Alma tunnel, which did used to be a place for Diana moon worship in France. So there's some sort of link to us for some reason there. Kind of makes a little bit like, oh, that's a weird link. But then there's things like she died on 31st and she hit the 13th pillar. So those are like mirrored versions of the number. Obviously, 13 has this unlucky or occult symbology to us. And then above the tunnel, there was a memorial, right? And it is a black eternal torch, which a symbol of the Illuminati to us. But that was then on top of a 5-pointed star. So all of these things start to like mount up as having some sort of occult significance, I guess. And you start adding all these things together. And basically that's how you start to think that, oh, this must be done out of ritualistic manners. I didn't really believe that it actually did stuff at the beginning. I just thought they believed it. It wasn't until a few years later that I started kind of believing, okay, I think they are actually getting power from this stuff. But to be honest, like all of this ritualistic stuff just is based on numbers, because a bunch of numbers add up. If it's some sort of occult numerological significance, then it's a ritual. And I think that's really what it all boils down to.
I'm going to ask you one more question about the sort of conspiracy world as you were experiencing it before we go to the final part about the exit. And so it's a question about play and games. And as you know, our podcast is called Conspiracy Games and Counter Games. So we're very interested in this idea about conspiracism as a kind of play. That is, folks getting together, trying to figure out a mystery with others. And there's this kind of joy of play. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I think it harkens back to what I was saying at the very beginning of the episode about that day on 7/7. You know, it was exhilarating. It was exciting because you felt like you were doing something. You know, you felt like you were breaking this case together. Yeah, it was participatory. There was like a reward at the end of like feeling good, like, we did good work today. We didn't do good work at all. And I'm very, very ashamed of that time.
So you told us a little bit about your discomfort with the kind of rhetoric and approach that a lot of this new brand of conspiracists were taking, you know, this idea about that this events never happened. That was kind of what started to trigger your sort of skepticism. But take us on a journey of how you made it out.
All those events that I was talking about, Boston Marathon bombing, Sandy Hook, Aurora, those were all between like 2012 and 2013. And it's where this hoax thing starts coming on. But from 2012 to say 2017 is when I came up with an idea to explain all that. And during that time, there was quite a few camps, quite a few different movements coming out of the movement. One was this whole everything is hoaxed and staged camp. And then there was the flat earthers started coming out. Then there was this Mandela effect stuff coming out. And then there was Pizzagate also coming out. And I don't know, I felt stupid versions of conspiracism, childish forms that just took away from the seriousness of stuff that we were working on for so many years. By 2017, instead of saying, okay, all of it's rubbish, I thought this is a psyop by the Illuminati. We've made so much ground in the past 10 years plus that we've got them running scared. And they've set a bunch of conspiracy theories out there to discredit us. Flat Earth, who the hell is going to believe that? All these sorts of things like that. And I was convinced that's exactly what it was that day. I'll actually try and find you the post because I posted it on Facebook in 2017.
Yeah.
Oh, we have time. Please.
Okay, here we are.
We can go look. Yeah.
This is on the 28th of February, 2017. So about a year before I actually gave up on all of it. And I think this is the start of me actually really starting to I've backed myself into a corner. I've moved every goalpost that I could. There's nowhere else to go, I think, after this point. Peace and blessings. My apologies to those who may be offended, but the truth movement has been compromised. There is a highly comprehensive and multifaceted psyop in the works. We as a movement have gained so much ground since 2000 that we have managed to pose a serious threat to the New World Order being established. It is for this reason that they want to split and destroy us. This psyop has 5 faces. Do not fall for this 5-finger death punch. 1. Hoaxes. They say violent attacks such as Sandy Hook, terror attacks in Paris, and the Orlando shooting are hoaxes, and that they were carried out by the media and emergency services, and crisis actors were used to act as victims, and no one died. 2. Flat Earth. We live in a geocentric model. The Earth is stationary and flat, and we live under a dome. 3. The Mandela effect. Our timeline has shifted, some say, with the parallel universe, and the past is not as we remember it. So, number 4, celebrity cloning centers. Certain celebrities, politicians, and other elites are actually cloned versions of themselves. And number 5, every one-hit wonder is in the Illuminati. They're saying every celebrity or every other elite is in the Illuminati. Every single person you see using certain hand gestures is in it, but we are truthers, not conspiracy theorists. This message is specifically for those who have woken up in the past 4 to 5 years, as I've noticed a lot of old school truthers aren't falling for most of these, apart from some of y'all believe in this hoax thing. But hey, there's room for debate on that topic. And I think that was like this real start of my exit, I think. The paranoia took over.
So in a sense, you began to be paranoid that, in fact, the conspiracy world itself had been infiltrated, and so that then are you saying that then introduced a kind of skepticism towards everything, and then things came to fall apart, or was it more sort of like things intensified to a certain moment until there was a kind of like nervous and kind of explosion or something?
Well, there was things happening in the real world that I just could not account for anymore. There's 3 major events that happened like between 2015 and 2018 that literally just made me go, okay, I've had it wrong all this time. This can't really be going on. I should also clarify that my conspiracism was split into 2. Okay, there was a spiritual aspect of it and there was a political aspect of it. The political aspect of it is what I'm talking about when it comes to the real world things happening, which helped break down, my political understanding of it. I should go back a little bit and explain how I came out of the spiritual version first, because I feel like that helped me get out of the politics. So I started to study a lot more to do with my religion. I'm Christian. I'm not a Catholic or a Protestant or anything like that. I call myself a mystic Christian. But I started to study a lot more about the historic context of when the words were written. I started studying a lot about the historicity of Jesus himself and his followers. I started to understand that hell isn't real, despite what the churches and all that speak. And then with a deeper understanding of the book of Revelation, I started to find out that 666 Antichrist was talking about Emperor Nero. It was talking about the time, when John was around. It wasn't foreshadowing something that would happen 2,000 years in the future. So with these understandings, I started to think or realize, A, there's no hell, and B, there's no Antichrist. So why are they setting up a new world order for the Antichrist to come and reign for the rest of whatever? That doesn't make sense. So that started pulling me away from thinking these people are satanic. or these people are devil worshippers or serving the Antichrist. Because it's not a moment where you just snap and you change your mind. It's a slow, gradual understanding. So that's kind of where I got out of the spiritual aspect of it, which serves how I got out of the politics. Now, as I said earlier, there was 3 events that happened within a space of each other that just really started to bring apart the political aspect of it. Those events were the election of Trump, the Brexit vote, or the results of the Brexit vote, and the election of Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader. Those were 3 things to me that just, if my political understanding of the New World Order was real, those 3 things would never have happened, ever. And it really shocked me. I was just like, the day of the referendum result, me and my partner were both like, where's the one world order? How does this serve the New World Order? This just doesn't, and it just started making us go, all right, we need some time away from all of this stuff. We need some time away. We need to try and figure all this out. Again, the rest is history. I'm here today now doing this.
You talk about how kind of these populist movements around something like Brexit sort of disprove or kind of show the cracks in this idea around the New World Order theories. And I guess I just wanted to ask for you to elaborate a bit more, because there's also an interesting tension, obviously, around, and these things are after your time, but things like QAnon in the United States are very closely tied to Trump and populist movements. And so I was just interested to hear your thoughts about how this kind of tension maybe plays out today a bit differently, as an outsider now.
It is completely dominated by one spectrum of political thought nowadays. From trying to understand conspiracies, conspiracy theories, conspiracists, and everything about where it comes from, the early 2000s was a sleight of hand by the conspiracy influencers. They were right-wingers. Alex Jones is a populist, alt-right, extreme Christian conservative, and we didn't notice it because he kept slagging off George Bush. We didn't think he was on that side. But doing my studies now, I know that these people have been pushing this for decades, for centuries even. Ever since Abbe Barrawell and John Robeson wrote the first books on the Freemason and Illuminati conspiracy theory, it's been to squash the left. It's been a protest against the invention of the left. And I didn't know it. I didn't realize it. They hid it from us that whole time, at least in the early 2000s. I think they saw the anti-war sentiment and thought, we could capitalize off this. There's a bunch of angry people that we can get to pull them in, but we have to keep the politics out of it and act like the left and right is the same. And they drop little things in there. I listen to some old Alex Jones stuff now, and I'm so ashamed that I didn't catch that shit. I just didn't catch it. I was too focused on some of the other stuff maybe he was saying to completely not realize that, crap, I'm pushing some anti-trans, anti-LGBT, anti-Semitic. I'm pushing all this stuff. This isn't what I want to do. Something I've noticed a lot about the movements today and the movements back then is the movement back then wasn't targeting normal people. It wasn't targeting your average citizen living their life doing whatever they do. It was trying to bring down the elite. And today, it's whoever is a member of the LGBT community, whatever minority, they're somehow the enemy. They're somehow the ones conspiring against you. And that is just so far away from the stuff that I got into at the beginning. It was about helping the people. It wasn't about blaming people.
You're doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Sorry, I get a bit emotional sometimes.
No, I can tell. And it makes a little sense. I just wanted to know if you wanted to break or if you're... Yeah.
No, this is... I like doing this stuff because it helps me understand, helps me remember. Because this goes back nearly 20 years now. It's 19 years now that I've got to try and remember. And I lived this in and out. So it's really cathartic. to do this, to speak about this, to figure it all out, because this is for believers and skeptics. Believers to be like, oh yeah, I know that person because I've been there. And then skeptics to just understand, like, we're not lunatics. We're not evil. We just believed lunacy. Even if it hurts to talk about it or makes you feel uncomfortable or whatever, it doesn't matter. It has to be done. It has to be done so people understand.
Just to go back to the question of community that we were discussing earlier, and because I was thinking, as you were describing so powerfully your journey out, this series of kind of realizations and how they kind of came about, how you felt in relation to others. I mean, how did the community around you shifted, or your relationship with that, and how do you experience that? How did that feel?
So in 2018, when I was like pushed into a corner and I didn't really know what was going on with my life anymore, like, or at least not with my life anymore, but what I thought about the world, what I did was I logged off. I went off of Facebook and I didn't go back on for nearly 3 years. Every once in a while I hopped on there and I would post a cat video and then walk off. But my relationship with the community was I walked away because I needed to figure it out. That's kind of who I am as a person, though. Sometimes I just need time to myself to figure things out. Now, going back to the community afterwards, it wasn't so good. Obviously, I turned my back on them. I'd hurt them. I come out and said, you're all wrong. But I tried to say it like, look, guys, I was wrong. So if I was wrong, you were wrong too. But it was very, very toxic coming back. That's for sure.
Brent, I wanted to ask you, I was watching one of your videos recently that I really enjoyed. This one you made, just kind of explaining some of your process of leaving the community. And you said something that really, really stuck with me about how one of the things that help you get out is that your interests remained intact. You could still explore the things you wanted to research and use your use your mind to kind of explore geopolitics of things that you were interested in. And so I wonder if you could maybe elaborate a bit more on the importance of having your interests still as a thing that you could maybe rely on as you transitioned out of the community.
Yeah, it gave me something else to like really focus on. I just like to understand things. So I needed to understand why I was where I was. And like even today, I'm still so interested in conspiracies, so interested, but I just will not believe them straight away or anything like that. I think it's great to have interests, isn't it? It's good to have something you can focus on, take away the stresses of the days of your work and stuff. And I don't know, mine seems to be like researching weird stuff, I guess. But it helped. And it helps today still, so that I can help other people understand, I guess. I want to help my truthers, the people that I had such strong relationships with over years. Some of these relationships are completely dead. And it's people I spoke to for 15 years, almost all the time, and they literally do not want to speak to me anymore. So yeah, I use these interests to learn more about these things that we believed in. And I try to bring them back out of that rabbit hole. I care about these people at the end of the day. They are my friends. And there's only like 3 hardcore conspiracists that are still my friend out of, I don't know, my Facebook was something stupid like 4,000 people on it at one time. I think I've lost like 1,500 or something in this past year, but still.
That brings us to kind of where we were hoping to kind of bring things towards a close, which is we were wondering, like, now you've taken the master's tools, so to speak. You're using YouTube, and you're using that platform, which has been such a super highway for so many of the conspiracy movements, to kind of try and introduce doubt and to tell your story, and also help people exit those communities, or at least the toxic parts of those communities. Why did you take that strategy, and And tell us a little about the strategy, like your kind of filmmaking strategy on YouTube. Like, why do you approach making content that way in order to reach people who are in the place that you might have been a few years ago?
Well, I'd like to preface this with the reason why I speak out, or the event that happened that made me go, all right, I need to start this conversation. And that is January 6th. Built up a bit by the COVID-19 conspiracies, which all through that pandemic stage, I was thinking, oh my God, I'm so ashamed that I used to be these people. They're just being ridiculous right now. But it was January 6th. It was the shooting of Ashley Babbitt. When I found out she was a QAnoner, it felt like the world stopped. And I looked at my partner and said, holy shit, that could have been you. That could have been me. Not that we were QAnoners, but we did believe there was an elite group that did satanic ritual sacrifice, did SRA, there were VIP pedophiles. And if I was in her shoes that day, I probably would have been there thinking, yeah, we're all going to take these evil people down. And yeah, just seeing that, finding out she was a QAnoner, she believed a lot of the stuff that I used to believe. And I just thought, shit, I think I need to actually speak out somehow. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what, but if I can just say one thing that will stop one person from going to that place and dying, then whatever, I've done something good. Yeah, and I settled on YouTube, basically. I settled on YouTube, and that's now evolved into making a podcast instead. So I feel I can get more accomplished in this new podcast that I'm doing. As I said, it started on YouTube, though, doing some reaction videos to conspiracism, to conspiracy videos, trying to do like live debunks of them. I went back and I watched the very first two videos that got me into the rabbit hole, the Millennium 2000 and Lucifer 2000. I went back and watched them, and I recorded myself debunking it as it goes along. YouTube is just a place, isn't it? It's the place to make this type of content, I guess. I will be continuing doing more videos, but I'm just trying to concentrate on this podcast at the minute, which, if I can give it a shout out, some dare call it conspiracy, is my friend, me and my friend Neil Sanders, and we will systematically break down as many conspiracies as we can. We're trying to focus on one topic at a time. We represent, like, for about an hour what the conspiracy theorists believe so that we don't misrepresent it. I provide a lot of my own experience of like how I believed these certain things, how I made it work, or why people would believe this thing or that thing. And then for the second and third hour, we basically strip away every single falsehood that conspiracy theory is based on. And by the end, we're just left with the little tiny bit of truth that is left, what the actual thing was about. And I absolutely love doing this one right now. This is absolutely fantastic. It's helping me also figure out what I believe now. It's helping me like really look into these conspiracy theories that I believed and figure out where I was being pulled from one direction or pulled from the other direction, who created it, who was spreading it, figure out who played me, and finding the truth to things at the very, very bottom of it all, like the new episode that I'm editing right now, World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. It's not something I actually believed in because I wasn't a conspiracist at the time, but it has so many parallels with other conspiracies that we used to believe in. And it's just that one is just so interesting seeing, okay, well, the truth is that, Klaus Schwab wrote a book called The Great Reset. That's about the only truth here. It's compared to all the conspiracies. Sorry, spoiler alert for the next episode.
Our listeners are mostly academics and some journalists and some artists. but generally people, I think, would associate themselves. I think I would dare say they probably associate themselves with the left. And I think very few of them would consider themselves to be in those conspiracy worlds. For that kind of audience, like what would you like them to take away from this conversation? And what do you think they need to be thinking about in terms of the dangers of conspiracism, and also the maybe hopeful points of what can be done about it?
I think there's a distinction between left-wing and right-wing conspiracies. And this is just from my experience. This is not, obviously, I'm not an expert. I'm not an academic. I haven't studied this. I think people who believe in conspiracies believe in them for two reasons. One is bigger on the scale than the other for each side. Okay. So for the right, conspiracies are based in suspicion with a tiny bit of cynicism. For the left, conspiracies are based in cynicism with a little bit of suspicion. And so I'd like to say, like, just because you're on the left or the right doesn't mean you're not going to fall for a conspiracy theory. It's just you're going to fall for it in a different way. So the right are very based in like a supernatural sort of suspicion, like, oh, these people work for the devil or something like that. There's a real suspicion. Oh, they're up to something else. They're up to something else. And then the left is more like, I don't believe what they got to say. I don't believe them. I think they're doing it for a different reason. The World Economic Forum is a perfect example. Okay, the right are suspicious of them because they think they want to enslave everyone. The left are cynical of them because they don't think they're going to do anything. They don't think their message is genuine, which probably is true, but because I've always been a progressive. I didn't realize I was a lefty or anything, just progressive guy. I notice a lot of lefties are a lot more cynical about these things. And I think that can breed like the conspiracy, because you don't know if these people are genuine.
It's actually just been such a fascinating conversation and so eye-opening and very moving. I think like in a very genuine way, like we're all, it's so important what you're doing. And also you're searching for kind of redemption is also very important and compelling. So it's been a real pleasure, and it's super enlightening to speak with you.
Thank you. Well, I got into it to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And just because I got out of it doesn't mean I still don't want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That for us is so revealing and so interesting, because we've been among those who've been sort of trying to push back within the people in our disciplines and academia who are sort of like, oh, well, this is all just kind of like, we've always wanted to be insisting that a lot of people who are in these conspiracy worlds are actually there because they are genuinely skeptical, smart people who are trying to figure out why the world's so fucked up, and if you don't start from that place, you're not going to have any success. And
and there's a humanity as well that you often gets lost.
And I appreciate your guys' work. See, this is something else that really surprised me, starting to look through this world, basically, is coming across Karen Douglas and Peter Knight, essentially first hearing academics speak about conspiracists without calling them dum-dums.
Yeah.
Basically actually trying to understand. And this is why I want to speak to people like you or Marcus Gilroy Ware, or anybody who actually wants to take this seriously and isn't, I don't know, just dismissing us as losers in their basement or something. I was not a loser. I was a popular person. I lost all my friends because of conspiracy theories. I didn't get into conspiracy theories or into conspiracism because I was lonely. I wanted to make a difference. And I'm so grateful that I get to come and speak to people like you who are compiling these stories, who are trying to figure out how to fix it from the top down. Do you know what I mean? I'm here trying to fix it from the bottom up so we can meet in the middle.
You've been listening to Conspiracy Games and Counter Games, Season 2 of The Order of Unmanageable Risks, a podcast about capitalism and its anxieties.
For more information about this podcast, to listen to other episodes, or to learn about the broader project of which it's a part, please visit conspiracy.games.